So Never Look Away is a film that it's 3 hours. I'll say that right up front. I want to mention that because it's a 3 hour film that doesn't feel like 3 hours. It felt engrossing enough where I wanted to stay within this world that takes place over the course of 40 years. So it starts in Nazi-occupied Germany, where this little boy Kurt receives some very important advice from his aunt. His aunt tells him that look, the truth is beautiful. The truth will set you free. So don't ever look away from truth, because truth is beautiful. Don't try to cover it up. Embrace it. Now she says this, however, before she kind of loses her mind. She strips off her clothing, and she believes that she's found the meaning of life, the center, the answer to everything in the universe. And then she's eventually kind of hauled off to the nut house, and thanks to a Nazi eugenics program, she is put to death. Now, years later, Kurt grows up, and Kurt kind of has like a similar kind of like epiphany, where he's kind of like, oh, I think I understand the true meaning of life. And his family's kind of like feared, like, well, is this kind of like that schizophrenia that his aunt had? I'm not sure, but Kurt knows that he wants to find out, he wants to preserve it. He takes his aunt's advice to heart and wants to find the truth. Namely, he wants to be involved in art. He's loved art ever since he was a kid. He wants to get involved with paintings, and he wants to find his voice. He wants to find some kind of truth within his art. Now, here's the interesting thing, though. While he's going to art college, which is just, it's very like experimental art. It's post-Nazi Germany, and German artists are just trying to find tons of like crazy new different ways to make art. And while he's doing this, he falls in love with Ellie, this woman who kind of becomes a little bit of his inspiration for him to keep finding his voice. But here's the interesting thing, though. Ellie's father is Professor Carl Siebend, who was actually the doctor involved in the eugenics program, who sentenced Kurt's aunt to death. Now, Kurt doesn't know this. He doesn't find this out until later, and Carl doesn't find it out until later either. So we're just kind of watching the film kind of play out up until this point where we're expecting them to connect, where they finally realize the connection that they have. And that's a great moment, but while we get there, we explore all these different aspects of like the politics of the era, how art functions. We also explore like romance and passion. Like, I love how like Kurt is still developing his voice, and he loves being with Ellie. He's willing to do anything with her. He's willing to go to West Germany with her. He has this like desire to even when he realizes that when something isn't his own, when he feels like he doesn't have his voice, he's willing to tear down and keep working on it, keep trying to better himself in the future. Meanwhile, Carl, who was actually, he wasn't found guilty during after like the Nazis fell, because of an act of kindness he did with delivering a baby. So they kind of let him go, but he still kind of has that, that eugenics thing in him, when he kind of realizes that, oh, this Kurt guy, I don't think he's right for our daughter. I mean, he doesn't even have the right genes. Back in my day when, I worked for the Nazis, you kind of get what he's going for here. He realizes, those days are kind of behind him, but that kind of sinister intention is kind of just lingering underneath there. And I love kind of like the balance here goes between like it feels like we get just enough of the politics of the era, of how they went about making art, Kurt's personality, how he's still trying to struggle with trying to understand life and what he wants to do with it, in addition to what his place is in the world. Like another bit of dialogue that sticks with him is that in one of the first scenes of the film, Kurt is actually in an art gallery, and he's being led on by this tour guide who's kind of like looking down on the art. It's like look at this painting. They paid so much for this. It could have gone to feed workers and stuff like that. It's like there's no point to it. There's no point to this art. And then he hears the words. He hears the words akin to basically like what does art do to elevate the soul? Like what is the point of it? And Kurt, I think, kind of understands this. The more he goes about exploring different means of trying to create art, and trying to, and eventually when he does discover what he wants to do with this art, it's such a perfect moment that encapsulates, how history, how the past can catch up with us, and how we have to embrace the future by essentially embracing truth. Because, like I said, you could call this film like Truth is Beautiful too, and it would have like the same effect here. It's beautifully shot. I love the kind of score they use here. It's very tragic. It gets pretty grisly at times. And it's brutally honest at times too. Like Kurt isn't just kind of like meek artist. Like he's actually got some teeth to him. Like he wants to make a statement in the world, and he actually wants to make something of himself. At the same time, though, it's not entirely somber too. There are small little nuggets of passion and joy here. I love the way he connects with the other kind of artists who are also trying to help him out along the way. I love towards the end there's a great bit where German television is trying to film the art gallery, and at one point they're standing in front of like a nude painting, and the cameraman's like, oh, you can't do that, like go to the other painting, and they go to the one of a Nazi, and it's like, you can't do that one, go to the next one. there's little nuggets of here there. It feels like a very believable, like lived in world, as opposed to one that's just of one note, of one type of tone and behavior here. It feels very all encompassing for a film that spans about 4 decades with its story here. It's got a lot to say about, like I said, with like politics and art. Explores a lot of these themes kind of deeply, and also because it's 3 hours, I think to the film's benefit of that running time, there's enough time for it to breathe, to kind of linger on it. Even when you have like these kind of montages between Kurt painting and between Kurt being between the sheets with Ellie, I love that kind of. There's enough time to get to know Kurt, to get to know Carl, to get to know Ellie, to understand the era, to understand how painting works, how trying to be experimental, and trying to get out of your shell, and trying to kind of understand the way that both Kurt and his aunt are thinking here. I really dug this film. It's unbelievably human and just beautiful to look at, and it feels like it's saying so much here. It's currently up for an Academy Award for best foreign language film, and I believe it's up for best cinematography as well too. It's been to some film festivals last year. It's starting to open up wide across the country now. I would definitely seek this out if you get the chance. So for Never Look Away, 4 out of 5 stars.